Hello, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going over our tackles, and it's going to be left and right tackles today. And so let's get it started. Draft day, who do you have as your number one overall tackle prospect?
Oh, my number one offensive tackle prospect, I have Greg Robinson, the offensive tackle from
Auburn.
He's 6'5", 330 pounds, long arms, prototypical. Kind of reminds me of a little bit of Jason Peters. I think his future probably the thing about Greg Robinson is people think that he's just automatically going to start left tackle day one. I probably don't think that's his best thing, because if you wanted to say who's going to be the best offensive lineman the first day one offensive lineman, it's probably not Greg Robinson. He's a little bit, how do I say this? A little bit raw right now, because as far as pass protection, because Auburn, what they asked him was to be a molar.
Right,
You're not
yeah.
He has to be a molar as a left tackle day one like that. His technique still needs there. He's a long way from being a top tier offensive lineman like in the NFL. He's probably not going to be the guy who makes the Pro his first year like Matt Khalil and Joe Thomas. Those guys made the Pro Bowl their first year because they weren't as raw. This guy's a little bit more raw than Matthews and Luan, but he also has the best upside of all of them.
Right. And so, what do you think team is going to pick him?
What team? I would probably lean towards the St. Louis Rams if he's maybe on the board. I'm here in St. Louis. There's a possibility Atlanta as well too. Atlanta is in need of offensive tackle. There might be a slot chance of maybe Oakland as well too, but Oakland probably has bigger fish to fry than offensive tackle at this point.
Right.
Those are just teams that I rank. The thing about him is he's probably better suited for a blocking team. You know.
What kind of scheme?
A power blocking team.
Oh, okay, yeah. So,
like blocking. So that's just
right. And so, did you have an NFL comparison for him?
Yeah, I called out maybe he reminds me a little bit of Jason Peters, the offensive tackle from the Philadelphia Eagles.
Right, yeah, and didn't he play tight end in his college days, right?
I think so, but he eventually developed into a tackle.
Right.
He was a late rounder. He was also a late bloomer, but Greg Robinson's a little bit more advanced at this point of his career than where Jason Peters was.
And you believe he's going to play left tackle?
What I would probably do with him is probably play him right tackle his first year, let him work on it a little bit, and then eventually move into left tackle. Similar to what I think what the Washington Redskins did with Trent Williams.
Right, yeah. And so, let's get on to it. What is your number 2 overall rated tackle prospect?
Not far behind. They're probably away from each other. Like, they were really close to each other. Like, I gave the slight edge to Greg Robinson. It was Jake Matthews, the offensive tackle from Texas A&M, who's been really in my top 10 for almost the entire year, and will probably end up being there. He's probably the most solid guy, and probably the guy, if I had to bet on in the entire draft, like the guy who's least likely to get us, it would probably be Jake Matthews. He's just a safe guy. He's fundamentally sound. He's pretty good as an athlete, you would consider, but like it's not nothing exceptional. But it's similar like Luke Jokel last year, like.
Right, very technically sound.
Not as much as like just as maybe an Eric Fisher or Lane Johnson. Like it's the same situation with Jake Matthews. Is like there's not as much to build with Luan as much as Luan. He doesn't have the upside that Luan or Robinson have, but at the same time, he's just the most solid one, and this one's probably going to be the one that's probably going to save us. down the line. The only thing I really could see him maybe flawing is if injury somehow came to evolve, impacted on him. And I think he fits in almost every blocking scheme, whether it be zone, whether it be man, or whether it be power.
Right, yeah. And what do you think his NFL comparison is?
I drew comparisons to probably plenty of guys right here, but the one that's very similar to me, like it came down to, I was gonna give you the one I originally gave in my original video, but I decided not to. I think that Luke Jokel reminds me of him. They're eerily similar, maybe because they played on the same team, but like I found them very eerily similar to each other.
Right. And so, so do you consider Jake Matthews to be the safest pick in this draft?
Entire draft, if I would have to put my bet on anyone not failing, outside of injuries, because you can never predict those, because injuries can happen to anyone, and they can end up having a bad career because of their injuries.
But yeah,
I would probably say he's the safest one.
Right. And so do you see him only playing left tackle or right tackle? What do you think is his best spot?
Or he obviously played right tackle for the majority of his career. For his sophomore and junior year, he played right tackle, and once Doble left, he was able to move to left tackle, and he showed his ability, and his play didn't drop off a single bit. He was just as good as he was as a right tackle, and that's eventually what rose him up the boards this year.
Right. And so now let's move
where he was.
Right. And so now let's move on to your third overall tackle prospect, and who is that?
I have offensive tackle from the University of Michigan, who's probably going to play left tackle, Taylor Lewan, at the University of Michigan.
Right, the troublemaker out of the group.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit bad stereotype. There is a bad stereotype around Taylor Lewan as far as the troublemaker, and that, yeah, he's a nasty guy. Yeah, he plays really physical, and sometimes he goes above the whistle, and he'll do a little cheating maneuver here and there. But at the same time, there's been plenty of offensive tackles that's been really successful playing as a mean guy. You've got to be the nastiest guys, and like the worst thing, like I'd rather have a guy who's just labeled as a nasty offensive lineman more so than a guy who's labeled as a soft offensive lineman, because there's plenty of them in walking around the NFL.
Right.
I'm not putting names out there, but like they've been labeled as soft guys. I'd rather my guy be labeled nasty, and just to me.
Right, me too. You're down in the trenches. You got to do dirty work. I want you to be nitty and gritty as the work you're doing. I don't want you to be soft.
Soft.
Yeah. So Taylor Lewan, he's sitting at 6'7" at 309
pounds, 33-inch arms. He was the fastest offensive lineman period in the entire combine. Athleticism was never ever a question for him. His feet work, his kick step, his kick slide, everything looked good.
I mean, he could have came out last year's draft and been a top 20 pick.
Last year's draft, I thought that there was a potential for him if he had maybe not had some of these red flags that we found this year. Had he had it last year, maybe he would have been the number one overall pick. He would have been maybe taken ahead of Eric Fisher. I definitely had him before January of last year. I had him as my number one all-rated offensive lineman, and Eric Fisher went ahead of him, and Joko went ahead of him. He could have been the number one overall pick potentially.
Right, and we
had a few flags this year with the fighting and the Ohio State thing, and how he behaved, the Kansas State game. He had a few games here that he had a falling out off for.
Yeah. So you see him playing only left tackle in the NFL. Do you think that's his true calling, is left tackle?
I could see him at right tackle as well, too. I mean, like, all three of them. I could also see him at right tackle as well, too, because he did play right tackle his freshman year, as I believe, out of Michigan. He played his freshman year at right.
Yeah. And then he switched over to left tackle.
And then he played left tackle majority of his career from then on out. He played in the profile system, and he played in a spread system at Michigan. So he's a little bit more scheme diverse as well as the rest of these guys, you know.
So
The thing about Luan, though, that it is a little bit of a flaw is the simple fact is he sometimes gets over aggressive, and he thinks that he's going to get into people's heads, and he plays so angry that he plays out of control that you can possibly beat him in that possible. Like if you have a guy who plays mind games, I think that he would give that those type of people would give Taylor Lewan a little bit more harder time than the guys who are straight up not going to play, who are going to be quiet. Like he said, like when he faced Jadeveon Clowney, that wasn't a guy who really irritated him because Jadeveon Clowney never really talks.
right, yeah. And so if you had like a loudmouth on the defensive side talking smack about him,
The NFL, there's plenty of those guys who will play head games with you. Jared Allen's one of them. You're gonna hear from Lamar Woodley, who does a lot of talking and will play mind games with you. There's
yeah,
plenty of
it's all
guys.
part of the game. It's all part of the game.
Yeah, I think that he would have a harder time against those guys.
Right. And so who do you think is his NFL comparison? Who does he compare to well in the NFL?
I really think that even though it's a Michigan guy, and I don't really want to just keep putting guys that score the same score, he reminds me of Jake Long a little bit from the Dolphins and now the St. Louis Rams.
Right, yeah. And so
They're eerily similar with the 77, and you could also bring up Jansen, the offensive tackle. He wore 77, and he looks kind of like him. He kind of recruited the same kind of guy for the last decade or so. Yeah, offensive linemen and left tackles and mid players tentatively do well in the NFL.
right. And so now we go to the fourth overall prospect, your tackle prospect, and who is that?
I had Zach Martin, and this is a guy where I believe that he's very versatile, probably the most versatile offensive lineman, but at the same time, I never believed that he could play tackle truly until the Senior Bowl. I finally started buying into him. Like when he was going up against every single guy and every guy that he was facing, he wouldn't be beat. He won every single matchup every single time. And that's when I was like, okay, convinced he could play tackle, but he's a little bit shorter than what you would like at 6'4", 308 pounds, short arms. Those type of offensive tackles like really scare me. But until he proves me that he can't play tackle and he's just a true guard, I'm going to stick him at tackle like Roger Stauffield from the St. Louis Rams. Like he played tackle all the way until we proved that he couldn't play tackle when he was a guard.
Right.
And that's the same way I feel about Zach Martin. Zach Martin's going to have to play. He's probably going to play tackle his first few years. Try him out. If he can't play tackle, he'll probably be a Pro Bowl guard. That's how good I think he is as far as just a pure technician, a good football player, smart, witty. Never missed a game at Notre Dame. Started every game from his freshman year all the way to his senior year. So.
Yeah. And so who's a good NFL comparison for him?
I compared him to a guard actually more so than a tackle because I think that his best position is at guard, but at the same time, his more values at tackle. I compared him to Marshall Yonda, the offensive guard from the Baltimore Ravens.
Right.
He did play tackle in college as well too, but he kicked in and became a Pro Bowl guard in the NFL.
Right. Marshall Yonda's an excellent player, so that's not bad to hear for Zach Martin. And so now we go to your fifth rated overall tackle, and who is that?
I have Morgan Moses, the offensive tackle out of Virginia. I mean, like, this is where the big drop-off is. Like, those top four offensive linemen are a little bit closer. Morgan Moses is probably sitting around the middle of the second round. But I could see him easily moving into that first round at the draft time, like as far as not my rankings, but I mean as far as where he could land, he could possibly land in the late first round. Offensive tackles tentatively get pushed up because there's not a lot of them. There's not going to be a lot of left tackle potential guys, and Morgan Moses could play the left tackle, so that's already going to be a treat to him. I think his best position is at right tackle. but I also think that people will try him out at left tackle. He has potential to be a left tackle as well too. He's got long arms. He's got the prototypical size. He had like almost 36-inch arms. It's like that's almost like a whole inch longer than Greg Robinson's.
Right, and
it was 2 inches longer than Jake Matthews.
And he's more of the underrated, not really underrated prospect, but I've seen a lot of teams starting to, not teams, but draft experts now starting to talk about him more and more. And the pick I see him going to is the Cincinnati Bengals.
Like because people really weren't paying attention to Virginia and their prospects, but like every single time you would see there, you would look at him and you would like, this looks like Eugene Monroe, this looks like Brett Albert. They brought in a lot of DeBrickashaw Ferguson. They brought in a lot of offensive tackles from that program, the UAB program. And he's just the next one in line. It's maybe because he was playing right tackle here, though, that he wasn't getting the attention that he needed to as far as draft nicks and draft scouts. But the NFL was already knew about him for a while, though. It was no secret to those ones. It was a little bit more secrets to the draft nicks.
Yeah.
So than to the NFL.
Yeah, and I think he could sneak into the first round. I think he will. I think a team that I see would be the Bengals.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I don't see
I could see him going up to Cincinnati. Worst case scenario, he's probably early second round, but I have him more rated as a mid-second rounder. But offensive tackles, they get pushed up a little bit because it's one of those positions you have to have. You have to have that guy being able to protect your quarterback on the edges, and it's a very difficult position to play.
Right, and all of why we are doing this, the third positional podcast is tackles, so it's pretty important. Now, who is his NFL comparison? Do you have an NFL comparison for him?
If I had to come up with one, now I don't necessarily think that this guy is eerily similar to him, but they're very close. I would go with Michael Orr, the offensive tackle from the Baltimore Ravens and now Tennessee Titans.
Right, yeah.
On the blind side, I think he's pretty similar. Like, he's pretty famous now. He's one of the more famous offensive linemen because of the movie The Blind Side, and everybody kind of knows him that way. Right. But yeah.
So now we get to is after Morgan Moses, is there a big drop off after that, or is it?
Well, it actually gets really close. Like, the big drop off is after Zach Martin. After Zach Martin, then it starts getting close by. Like, you could really pick and choose. Joel Benito at number 10, Juwan James, James Hurst, Chantrell Henderson, and Jack Mewhort. They're all like really, really close between each other, as well as even Billy Turner and Antonio Richardson and Cyrus Quantrill. Like, the next few guys like down the list are really close to me. They're third round, second round guys.
Right, and so
I probably think that could go in the fourth round. It's relatively gets closer, but there's a big drop off after Zach Martin for me.
All right, so Zach Martin is the big drop off and top four, and so Morgan Moses, and let's just go ahead and just name the group that's really close together, starting with Morgan Moses and ending at whoever is at the end of your list of who the prospects are close together.
It's pretty much from 5 to 14. I'm looking down the list. 5 to 14, Morgan Moses, Jack Mewhort, Chantrell Henderson, James Hurst, Juwan James, Joel Benito, Billy Turner, Antonio Richardson, Cyrus Quantrill, and Cameron Fleming.
And who out of all those is the one you like the most out of that group? Is there somebody you like outside of Morgan Moses? Which one you like?
The one I really think that down the line really could become one that people are talking about for a long time is James Hurst. He was a little bit highly thought of, more so in the draft community than he was in the NFL community always. But like after the injury, like everybody really like kind of dropped him off, and he's been kind of scaled off as an offensive tackle. Like because of the injury, but he'll be okay. It was a bowl game. It was a late injury, so he might not be ready for training camp. But once he is ready and his body is back to 100%, I think he can become a starting tackle. You can have a great investment as you maybe get your starting left tackle maybe in the third, maybe fourth round pick. That doesn't happen that often. James Hurst, I really like him. I normally would have rated him higher if his injury wasn't so late into the year. That was the worst possible scenario, having such a devastating injury on your last game.
Right. Yeah. And
yeah, he probably second round pick, but now he's probably gonna be around a fourth or fifth round pick.
Right. And so, and in this group, you also have you have Billy Turner, and most people kind of don't know him, that average fan, and he's the North Dakota State guy, I believe, right? The Bison.
Offensive tackle, like the Bisons are a powerhouse out there, and I really thought his school is like the top 30 team period in college football. Like they're a real legitimate powerhouse. They're the Alabama, they say, FBS, and he's really the product. He was the best player on that team. He was the guy who everybody looked to, who made every All-American team, and he was a sound technician there. He has potential to maybe play guard in the NFL, but I would think that teams would probably try to play him at right tackle first, his first few years.
Right. And so now after
slight him being able to back up at left tackle, probably a backup at left tackle.
Right. And so after who was your last guy that you put number 14 was
Prince Fleming.
Right. So after him, who is how many prospects you have after him, and is there a huge drop off after him?
There's not as big of a drop off, but there is a drop off, and I would probably say Justin Britt of offensive tackle from Missouri is my final ranked one, which is 26.
Right, and so
26.
Right,
offensive tackle ranked.
So now let's get back to this second tier group, and let's talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of James Hurst, who else do you like out of there?
A guy who I think that he has the amount of a mountain of offensive tackle potential. Like he can be almost like the number 1 or 2 offensive tackle. Like he has first round offensive tackle talent. Like, but he never ever really played up and never was consistent enough. But he's still on my list high enough where I believe in him. Is Chantrell Henderson, who's my 7th rated offensive tackle. He's probably a right tackle, but at the same time, when you watched him, it's like when you watch sometimes DJ Fluker, like he was that good of an offensive tackle. Where I believe that he could actually have been a first round pick, but at the same time, off the field concerns, he plays lazy. Sometimes he doesn't. He brings it. Sometimes he doesn't. He doesn't bring his workman's hat. Every red flag possible, like as far as work ethic and there. And even his own coach benched him. He was the best player on the Miami team, quote unquote. Like people from like that were in the the Miami Hurricanes. I've talked to a few of them. They've let me know that Chantrell Henderson is the best player clearly on the team, but he doesn't work like he's the best player. He works like he's probably a role player or a bottom tier player on their team, like a guy who's not really all that good. He doesn't work that hard at football. It's all. I'm saying even if he does do well in the NFL his first 2 years, how is he going to play once he starts getting the big time contract? Is he going to come in out of shape? Is he going to come in with a working ethic? All of those things scare me. But at the same time, when you see him, I remember the Florida State game. He was really, really good. He seemed like he was almost the best player on the entire football field. But he gets benched after that. I'm like, what's going on with him?
And he's
one game he's really good, and then the next game the coach is benching him. I can't understand him.
And he is a big, big boy out there too.
Mm-hmm.
And is he the biggest offensive tackle in this draft? I believe
he's the biggest offensive tackle I have rated. I think so. I think he's the biggest offensive tackle I have rated.
And he's what at 6'8", I believe, or he's 6'8", like
no,
what?
Yeah, 6'8". Yeah, 6'8".
And 300 and what, like 40?
He's 6'7.5" actually, and his combine weight was 331 pounds. But I don't know if that was really his playing weight, because he didn't lose weight even from from the Senior Bowl to the combine. I wonder, if that's really his playing weight. His playing weight might be more closer to 240, 250.
Yeah, 340, 350, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, combine weight. I have the combine weights listed, but at the same time, these might not actually be their playing weight because he might be a little bit bigger in an actual game situation.
Right, and he was rated very touted coming out of high school. He was number 2 overall in Rivals, I believe. Number 1 in some websites.
Yes. He was highly recruited out of Minnesota. He originally was a USC commit and kind of handled kind of poor as well. I thought he was recruiting kind of poorly as well too because he committed late and then he decommitted as soon as he heard of the sanction. He went to Miami.
Right, and he's a big boy, and I've been seeing him playing for quite some time now, and I believe in the right system and the right people pushing him, he can be, as you said, the best tackle out of this whole group at all.
Yeah, I believe so too, but at the same time, the only person I think that ultimately motivates Chantrell Henderson is Chantrell Henderson. Like, there's other guys who you could like, well, he just didn't have the right people around him. I just think that Chantrell Henderson just needs to grow up.
Right. If he wants it bad, he'll have it.
He'll have it.
Right.
Because he has all the talent in the world to be the all-pro type offensive tackle. As good as DJ Fluker was for the San Diego Chargers even. Maybe even better.
Right. And so, is he your biggest boomer bust out of the tackle group?
I'm going to actually go a step further as far as the biggest boomer bust in the entire offensive line group. I think he's the biggest boomer bust in the entire NFL draft. Like, this guy is either going to shine or he's going to fall flat in his face. There's not going to be in between with Chantrell Henderson. I can't foresee him being an okay offensive lineman. I either see him being a really good offensive lineman or he's going to be a really bad one.
Right, and I feel the exact same way about him. I've always was intrigued by him because of how big he played, and I was intrigued, like, he has all the talent in the world, but yet, at times he just doesn't give it all. Sometimes he doesn't put his mind to it, and I want him to be successful in the NFL. Both me and you want him to be a great player in the NFL. And so, do you have any last notes about this tackle class?
There's I don't even have ranking here as far as tackles, but as the interior offensive lineman. His name is he's from Canada.
Isn't he the dude? I believe I saw this as your number 1 rated CFL prospect. Is that the same guy we talking about?
Yeah, I was talking about Laurent Duvernay Tardif, the offensive tackle from McGill. He might be able to play guard. The kid is really raw. He only got to practice once a week. He was a medical student, and medicine is his passion. He only got to practice once a week. That's what really intrigues us. How can you really be that good and catch on to football really that quickly if you only practice once a week? I mean, that means he's really intelligent. He's able to pick up the game really quickly. He at his pro day, his workouts, jaw dropping as far as offensive tackles. The CFL people are so in love with him. But they realize that they're probably not going to ever get a chance to get him because he's probably going to end up in the NFL. And if he's drafted in the NFL, the likelihood is he's probably not going to ever touch the CFL level. And he's going to probably be a long-term offensive lineman as far as that. He's a project, so that's always a concern. He doesn't know all the football rules, all the American football rules, because at McGill, they don't play the same football as college football as we do in the United States.
Right. And so, I always get very intrigued about small school prospects or CFL prospects. Like, I always look at the CFL, what's their big board out there, and why do they have these players ranked so high, and why can't these players play in the NFL? And it always intrigues me to see that. And he's a very intriguing prospect for me to watch, and hopefully he does well in the NFL and, shows the CFL that he can play in the NFL, and he's a very intriguing prospect, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. He has a lot of talent as well, too. He can jump off the roof. He can move like heck. And when he was doing the bench press, I think he did somewhere around in a 30. So even for a guy for long arms, that's kind of almost freakish.
Right. And so that concludes our tackle prospect rankings for today, unless you have any last comments about this, the tackles in this draft class.
That's pretty much it.
Right.
The top guys, and the guys who are sitting in the middle are the guys in the middle.
Right. And so our next draft prospects podcast is going to be what, according to you? What is our fourth most important position in the NFL? When drafting.
We're going to be pushing to the cornerback position.
Cornerbacks, and this group, from what I heard, you don't have really a top, tier talent here at like a Patrick Peterson or a good top 5 selection. So it'll be intriguing, and I'll give a little preview. Is this one of the least not as depth position here in the draft?
The top of the board is probably it's a little bit deeper than I gave it credit for, but the top of the board is not. If you're going the second and third day, the cornerback is a strong position, but as far as the first day, it's probably one of the least more impressive of the last few years for me.
Right, and it's slim pickings, as they would say, up there at the top for these cornerbacks. But from now, this is Draft Day, and this is his prospect rankings. Please check out his previous videos on all his rankings. He does a very good job there. Follow him on Twitter at DraftDay101. Subscribe to him on YouTube and like his videos. And that's it. Join us next time where we will be going over the cornerback rankings of this draft class.